Right guys, pen and paper at the ready because class is in session. Today we're going to look at progressive overload. I want to teach you everything about it, what it is, how you use it, why it's relevant in a muscle building program. So progressive overload basically falls on this principle that unless you're getting stronger, you're not building muscle. But progressive overload doesn't just mean adding more weight to the bar. There are so many different ways that we can actually progressively overload our training to ensure that we create a more meaningful and intensive training stimulus over a period of time and thus build more muscle over a period of time. If progressive overload were just to be about adding more weight to the bar, that is an absolute surefire way to gain injuries and to very quickly reach a ceiling point in progression. You simply cannot adapt quickly enough to just keep adding even just a 1.25 kg on either side of the bar week in, week out. So we've got to be creative and look at other ways that we can progressively overload without just slanging more weight on the bar. Okay, so take some notes. There are 6 primary tools that we can use to progressively overload. Number 1, obviously, is the load on the bar. This means simply adding kilos to the bar each week. And this is really the best means to progressively overload when your technique is perfect and at the beginning of a training cycle when there is lots of scope for you to add strength. Now remember, strength gain isn't just the product of adding more muscle tissue. It can also be, and is predominantly on large in the early phases, the product of neurological adaptations, or rather neuromuscular shifts. I'm not going to get into the boring science bit, but predominantly it comes down to like enhanced rate of motor unit firing, increased motor unit recruitment, better motor unit synchronization, enhanced intermuscular coordination, and reduce inhibitory signals from Golgi tendons. Again, boring stuff for now. Anyway, back to it. Load progression is generally best for those people who are pretty new into it, especially new into a training cycle, and who have their technique down. Number 2, the second thing you can progressively overload is your reps. So if you can't increase load, you can increase the reps. So let's say week 1, you do 100 kilo bench press, 3 sets of 12. In the subsequent weeks, you might go 3 sets of 13, 3 sets of 14, 3 sets of 15. And at this point, once you're 2 or 3 reps in advance of the original rep range, you're likely to be able to add some more load to the bar again. The third variable that you can actually progressively overload is the total number of sets. So a 3 times 12 with 100 kilos bench press could become a 4 times 12 100 kilo bench press. And by doing this, you're simply adding volume. I would recommend this particularly for weaker body parts. Rather than just focusing on hammering them with more load, add additional volume through adding additional sets. The only caveat to this, I would say, is that be considerate of fatigue accumulating. And you'll know that your fatigue is accumulating when you lose that interest to go into the gym, when recovery feels that little bit slower, when your actual strength starts to drop as well. So yes, add sets, but typically speaking, I don't like to go more than around 24 to 30 sets, absolute maximum per session. So if you're adding sets to a movement, expect to be reducing them, taking them away from something else. And this is really where smart programming comes into place. The fourth variable that you can change to progressively overload is the tempo. So if we think about time under tension, that just simply relates to the amount of time that a muscle is working. And one thing we like to do with the clients on the Titanium transformation program is go through phases where we focus a little bit more on eccentric loading. Now this simply means how we load the bar, or how we load the muscle rather, when we are lowering the weight. In a bench press example, the eccentric phase is when we're fully extended in the elbow and we come down into elbow flexion. It's this downward motion. That is the eccentric phase. And by prolonging that period of time, we're increasing the amount of time under tension for the pectoral muscles. So in doing this, again, using that example of the 3 sets of 12 with 100 kilos, if the tempo dictates that on week 1, it's a 1 second, or call it like a 2 count on the eccentric, we could increase that to a 3 count in week 2 and into a 4 count onto week 3. So rather than it going 1, 2, up, it could be 1, 2, 3, up in week 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, up in week 3. The main consideration with doing eccentric loading progressive overload is that, bear in mind, it is the most synonymous training style with muscle damage and subsequent muscle soreness. So you don't want to do this too much for too long because you will feel that the recovery period between sessions will be that little bit longer. The fifth way you can progressively overload is through increasing the range of motion. So this is particularly useful for those people that have limited range of motion in the first place and you work them through to a healthier range of motion. But even for those people with normal range of motion, you can find clever ways to increase beyond the typical range of motion within an exercise. So one way to do this, again, using the bench press as an example, rather than using a straight bar, you might use a cambered bar, in which then with a cambered bar, where the bar touches the chest on the curvature, you would find that the hands are positioned lower than the pectorals, as per how they would be with a straight bar. And what this does is it places the muscle under far more tension in a stretch position thus increasing the potential stimulus for growth. The sixth variable you can change or progressively overload is your rest durations, and this is how we increase session density. Let's say you have a minute rest between those 3 sets of 12. You could bring that rest period down to 55 seconds, and then 50 seconds, and then 45 seconds over a 3 to 4 week period. Now we need to be careful with this, because what we don't want to do is get to a point where we are working way too much of a metabolic emphasis, which has very little effect on muscle growth. But if we're working with longer rest periods for that strength endurance, muscle building, hypertrophic range of repetitions and rest periods, we might find that dropping a 2-minute rest period down over the course of 3 or 4 weeks to a 1 minute 30 could challenge the muscles and progressively overload them. So in terms of how we actually implement a progressive overload protocol, well, week 1 is about establishing a baseline. Perform the movement as per its intended repetition range, set range, tempo range, technical range, and everything else. Establish that baseline. In week 2, select the variable that you want to progressively overload. It could be tempo, it could be load, it could be sets, it could be repetitions, but look to make a small progression in whichever realm that you deem is most appropriate for yourself with that exercise. Keeping it really simple, I would go for adding reps initially. So let's say you can do 3 sets of 12 with 100 kilos. You complete those 3 sets of 12. At this point, you're in a great position to actually progressively overload by adding repetitions. Shoot for 3 sets of 13. Once you've done that, shoot for 3 sets of 14 in the next week. And then once you hit 2 or 3 reps above that rep range that was initially allocated, then you're in a position to increase the load again. Now, progressive overload can't just continue forever. If it could, we'd all be walking around like absolute warriors, Hathor Bjornsson, Ronnie Coleman mutants. So we need to be mindful that actually there is a limitation where fatigue starts to accumulate, where injury risk starts to accumulate, and just where shit starts to snap if we don't take a little bit of a step back. And this is what's called a deload. And a deload is simply a return to baseline or slightly beneath baseline for a period of around about a week typically. And during this week, you would just allow your systems to recover, give yourself a little bit of a break, but also neurologically and psychologically give yourself a chance to rest and recuperate. And what this does is it actually allows that progression to occur after pushing yourself deep into overreach, which is simply the phase where fatigue starts to accumulate above the point of recovery, and we see a little bit of a performance regression. So you'll know the time to implement a deload when you start to feel that your strength and output or your interest in training starts to come down. Typically, you'd want to do this every 4 to 6 weeks, but it really depends on the speed at which you are progressively overloading and, of course, your training performance. You might find that you can progressively overload for 6, 7, 8, or maybe even 9 or 10 weeks without needing to take a deload. Everybody's different and lots of factors play into it. So let's summarize this. What actually counts as progressive overload? Number 1, performing a movement with more weight. Number 2, lifting the same weight but with more repetitions. Number 3, lifting with better control or a prolonged tempo, so increasing the time under tension. Number 4, getting deeper into the movement, so increasing the range of motion through the stretch position. Number 5, increasing volume through adding sets. Number 6, reducing rest periods between sets. Number 7, removing momentum so that there is actually more tension through a larger range of the movement. Number 8, matching your previous session's output within a heightened state of fatigue. And if you're stacking up any one of these things for a prolonged period of time, you can be pretty damn sure that you are building muscle tissue. Proviso being, of course, that you are supporting it with great recovery protocols and great nutrition. So obviously, this is why, it's so important to actually log your sessions. Log it or lose it. Like, how are you gonna know if you're progressively overloading if you're not systematically logging your sessions? So make notes on the weights you've lifted, the repetitions you've done, the rest periods you've done, even any technical notes on your tempo, on your movement execution, on the depth you're hitting. All of these things are relevant to make sure that you are actually comparing like for like and you are progressively overloading in at least one of the variables every single week. So look, principally guys, this is how you train with intent. This is how you guarantee that progression is occurring. You take guesswork out of the equation. If you want to learn more about the training process behind getting into phenomenal shape, building an awesome muscular lean physique, and you're interested in working with me as your one-to-one coach on my mentorship, just DM me the word titanium. Or if you want to join the awesome group, the private group TitanShift, where I put through a huge amount of content, including 5 class modules looking at training, nutrition, supplementation, accountability, and even my 120-day complete internal mindset rewiring module, which is the key for both permanent transformation, but also heightened rate and speed of transformation. This group comes to the private community. We do 2 weekly Zoom calls as well, Monday accountability and Monday momentum. And then on Fridays, we do our deep dive Q&A and a mastermind subject as well. It's a phenomenal resource you can apply just simply by DMing me the word shift. And it's a great way to enter into the Titanium ecosystem. Anyway, that's it for now, guys. Stay tuned for more classroom lessons. Cheers.